Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 29 of Opening Basics. In this video we're going to take a look at the Ponziani opening. This is the last new opening that I'm going to look at in the E4, E5 series. I'll do one more on E4, E5, maybe one or two more. One on revisiting some lines in the Italian game, and then another one after that, talking about building an opening repertoire around E4, E5. But this is the last new opening that's independent of the other one. So let's take a look at it. E4, E5, knight f3 attacking the center pawn, knight c6. And now there's four main moves here. Bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez or Spanish game. There's bishop c4, the Italian game. There's d4, the Scotch game. There's knight to c3, the four knights. And now the fifth choice here, c3. This is known as the Ponziani opening, an opening that's been around since the 17th century when Ponziani played it or wrote about it. I'm not sure how he got his name attached to it. As often happens when the pawn has been placed on c3 and there's a pawn on e4, the best plan for black is to counterattack. This situation arises also in the c3 Sicilian, the Alpine Sicilian, where the pawn is placed to c3 early. And the best move for black is to counterattack that pawn. And there's two different ways to counterattack it, which is also true of the Sicilian line, the c3 Sicilian. The two ways to counterattack are with knight f6 or d5. And both of them are interesting and give black an even game. So I would say, as white, this is not an opening you choose to play for an opening advantage, but just as an opening you can play to get to an even position and to get your opponent out of his preparation, out of his book, and onto unfamiliar ground. So that's your motivation as white to play this opening. And it has been played at the top level. Hikaru Nakamura has revived it and played it in some games, and I think even Magnus Carlsen tried it out once or twice. So, let's take a look at the knight f6 line first. So, knight f6, counterattacking the pawn, and then you can just defend quietly with d3, but that's not the main idea. The main idea is to push on with d4, counterattacking. And now black can grab this pawn. Of course, he's not really going to win a pawn because white is going to get this e-pawn back pretty soon. Now, what's interesting is that right here, the old main line was d5. And this was played in quite a few games. But this appears to be one of those lines that's been completely busted by computer analysis. So black has a really good move here, which you would not know unless you had checked it out. I don't know. I can't say you wouldn't know it. It is a counterattacking idea, so you might have discovered it, bishop c5. But it's only with the chess engine that we can say with confidence that actually black has a good position here. It gives black a strong advantage. And, it's not really clear. I mean, this is the sacrifice of an entire piece. So d takes c6, grabbing the knight. Bishop takes f2 check, getting a pawn, forcing the king to e2. And then just dropping the bishop back to b6. That's the innovation the chess engine brought to this position. Previously, black just played b takes c6, and white's actually a little better, having suffered some damage here. But when but being a piece up for some pawn damage is pretty good. But with this retreat, there's still some threats against the king. And the king side over here, particularly knight to f2 is a threat there, forking the queen and the rook and getting some material back. So the line continues, queen to d5, and the idea is that this pawn is now threatening to take on b7 with the fork of those two pieces. This allows knight to f2, but at least knight to f2 is no longer hitting the queen because the queen got out ahead of. And then c takes b7, bishop takes, giving up a piece, or giving a piece back, and then grabbing the rook in the corner. And so we have a completely crazy position where at the moment black is an exchange ahead. He's got two rooks and 2 pieces. No, that's not correct. Let's see. What is the material balance here? 2 rooks and 2 pieces versus 1 rook and 4 pieces. So that is 2 pieces for a rook. And then black has some pawns. So the chess engine rates this position, though, as favorable towards black. White is going to get another pawn back with knight takes e5. That's the next move. But then black is going to chase the queen away and get his forces organized. Black can castle here, and white can't. White's king is going to be stuck in the center. And, well, the rook against the 2 pieces will make for an interesting middle game struggle here. So that could be a very interesting way to play as black. Just sacrifice that knight there and see what your opponent does, see how well he copes with that situation. Anyway, after knight f6, that's the reply we're looking at from black, and d4, knight takes e4. d5 is not forced. That just was the main line until this computer bust was found. So instead of that, there's other moves that could be played here. Probably bishop to d3 is a good move here. And now this is something that leads to about an even position. Black will reinforce the knight with d5, and white will grab this pawn. So the material is even. Both sides will be able to castle here. Let's see, we can continue this a little more. This is kind of forced. Knight takes, pawn takes. Well, it's not forced exactly, but that's the best reply for black, is to go ahead and exchange off that knight, which was pretty strong there on e5. And we get this position. So the development's about equal. Black's turn will be next, but bishop to c5 can be met by either bishop takes e4 or by castling. And let's see, is there a problem? No, either one of those works. Either bishop takes e4 or castling will defend against the threat to f2 there. And playable position for both sides, and kind of an interesting shot. So I think I might try that next time I see the Ponziani. Try this knight f6 line and see if they fall for it. The way that I always played against the Ponziani is the second way of challenging this pawn. That's the idea. Once you see these 2 pawns on c3 and d2, they're blocking the natural development of the knight, which is the piece you really want to develop to support the e4 pawn. So whenever you see this as black, you should just think, how can I attack that e4 pawn? And the 2 main moves are either knight f6 or pawn to d5. So let's look at this pawn to d5 line. And this is the way I used to always play it. So there's a couple ideas here for white at this point. White can, let's see, he can just take the pawn, and that leads to kind of a quiet continuation. Not too much of an advantage for either side. But the interesting ways to play are to try and pin this knight and get pressure on the e-pawn. And there's on the e-pawn. And there's 2 different ways that that white could pin. Let's look at bishop to b5 first, pinning the knight and threatening to take this pawn. And in response, black can trade pawns here. Pawn takes and knight takes. And then this knight can be defended with the funny move queen to g5. So this is a very tactical continuation once again. So an interesting way to play. It's hitting the knight, it's hitting the bishop. And what's funny is that white can get away with not defending the knight, just leaving it hanging, but playing the aggressive move queen to a4 with this pin on the knight. And if the queen grabs over here, this is not good actually, because black can grab here, keeping the material balance. And if you take this bishop, then actually white will win the exchange, take back with check, and grab the rook in the corner. So at this point, the king's in check and has to move. And white's gotten something out of this. So this is actually an advantage to white. So in this position, after queen a4, it's best not to grab the knight. Just leave it hanging there, and then play knight to e7, defending your own knight. And now white needs to defend or move, do something about this knight F4 can be played. That's in the opening book. Or also, also knight takes c6 can be played, just getting out of trouble that way. And both those lines are okay for white. They're also okay for black, leading to roughly even positions. So interesting ways to play. Let's back up. In this position, after d5, counterattacking the pawn, actually the most popular way of going after the knight is to play the move queen to a4 first, with the idea of later coming in with bishop b5 and intensifying the pressure. So once again, there's a pin on this knight. This e-pawn is hanging. And what's funny about this position is that, well, rather than taking, I guess taking doesn't lead to a whole lot. Knight takes e5 can still be played, and maybe you'll have trouble defending this pawn. So taking is not so good in this case. So just defending the pawn is in order, and the top choice here in the opening book is f6. Let me back up. Just to be clear, this pawn takes e4 is still a playable move, but it gives a little edge to white. But f6 is a way for black to try and keep things even. Now, you generally don't want to play this move f6. It's very rare in the openings where moving the f-pawn for black is a good idea. But, well, there's the exchange variation in the Ruy-Lopez where it's an idea to play f6, an important line. And then there's also this line in the Ponziani. The thing is, the queen has gone over here to the other side of the board, so there's no longer any threat of the queen coming out on this side and delivering a check and causing some disruption on your king. So just defending the pawn with f6 seems fine. Now this knight has not really got any threats. Bishop to b5, continuing to threaten this knight, and try and pick up the rook if allowed, with the exchange and the check to grab the rook in the corner. But just knight g to e7 with the pawn on f6. Knight's not going there, but it's got a good square here, reinforcing this knight. And now it goes e takes d4, and e takes d5, queen takes d5. Pretty much forced. You don't want to move this knight again. You want to keep it defending. And then maybe d3 or castles or d4. And d4 is actually the top choice in the opening book. Let's put this on just to see if there's any tricks here. Looks like there's a variety of responses that black has at this point. He could just develop a piece like bishop d7. He could also play more aggressively and push on with e4. And, well, once again, we get a position where there's chances for both sides. The chess engine actually likes this move, e4, and thinks black is a little better after that, trying to displace this knight, drive him back to, I guess the knight doesn't have many good squares. If it goes, the pawns are covering the forward moves. It doesn't want to get stranded out here, so it might have to go back to g1 and regroup to e2 after e4. So anyway, it looks like that's an interesting way to play. So that's it for the Ponziani. Like I say, it's a opening. White isn't playing for an advantage. It's more just to get black out of his opening book. And well, let's just go put the opening moves on, and c3, the key move of the Ponziani. But the idea of building up with d4, if black doesn't do anything to counterattack, white can just build up a big center and get a comfortable position. So so look to those counterattacking moves, d5 and knight to f6, and remember that funny bishop to c5 counterattack on f7 to cause trouble in the knight f6 line. So a couple of interesting lines for you. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and stay tuned for the next video when I wrap up my e4, e5 coverage. See you then. Bye.